Escrow is a tool whereby an impartial agent mediates some agreement between parties. Let's take a look at the example of a real estate transaction. Most day-to-day transactions involve a relatively low amount of value exchange. For example, let's say you want to buy a meal. Maybe you don't like the meal. Maybe you don't like the taste. Worst case scenario, maybe it makes you sick. The downside risk associated with most day-to-day transactions is relatively low. On the other hand, with real estate transactions, the amount of value exchange and downside risk is so large that there is an entire industry built around mitigating it. That industry being the escrow industry, and I'll lump in there the mortgage industry. When a buyer wants to buy a property, they want to make sure that the property is having the specs that were initially presented to them. They want to make sure they're actually buying it from the owner so they don't get a random knock on their door after they moved in from some person asking, "Why are you in my house?" They want to make sure that the property has functioning systems. They want to make sure that the neighborhood that the property exists in is up to par. On the seller side, the seller wants to make sure they're interacting with a buyer who actually has all of the money being agreed upon as the final sale price at the beginning of the transaction. The role of the impartial agent has typically been filled by a third-party company operated by human beings. This is the standard for how things are done today. The concept of Kalygo is to leverage software, particularly blockchain or smart contract-based software, to make the escrow process cheaper, faster, and more secure for both the buyer and the seller, as well as for the secondary parties typically involved in a real estate transaction, the primary ones being financial institutions and governments. Kalygo is a very flexible way of approaching the escrow problem. There's many different contracts that you can use, and you can customize them all as well. It's a completely open source platform. If you do choose to do things in a very risky way, don't be surprised if you don't get support, or if you tweak the software in a very risky way, don't expect support.